The Jewish leadership as a whole had turned their backs on Jesus. Their backs were turned for a long time, actually, but now they had him, so they thought, in their grip, and that God had Yeshua, Mashiach, Jesus the Christ, in his grip. And they were really ultimately in control, and they had no idea. Satan wasn't in control. The leadership wasn't in control. The Jewish people, the Gentiles around him, the Roman armies, nothing was really ultimately in control. So when you're going through real tough times and when you're going through dark places and you're going through struggles and problems, if you've committed yourself to the Lord, you are good. Sure, you make mistakes throughout. I have. But if you walk in the Lord, in the power of his might, you have control, even to the point where you might get persecuted and mistreated. Glory to God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Do you remember that in the Beatitudes of Matthew chapter 5 and many other verses? All right, I have a ton to talk to you about. I might have to do different parts of this. I'll see if I can keep it short. Stay with me. It's very interesting. What we're really going to talk about is this guy named Pontius Pilatus. Pontius Pilatus. Marcus is his first name. And we know him as Pontius Pilate. He was the procurator. Who is that? These are big words for you who are younger. It's big words for me too. Procurator. He was a prefect. He was he was kind of an equestrian, not someone who rides horses and all. That's cool. But basically it was a second level. This is a first level legate and higher level of officials, and he was a second level, and he was kind of a knight, Knight. And that's kind of a word, kind of a sense of riding horses, but he was a second in command of riding horses. Now, he was over Judea, and we'll go on in a little bit. He was also over Samaria and Idumea. I'll show you that on a map in a few minutes or soon. But there was one above him, Velatius, which is above Syria, which is in Syria, and he actually was over Pilate. And so let's get into him. But before we do, let's get a context of where we're at. In Matthew chapter 27 now, we're in the new chapter, yeah. Early in the morning, and we don't know exactly what time, probably 7 o'clock, could have been a little earlier, could have been a little bit later, probably pretty early. And I've read that in history, Pilate liked to do his cases, and he was sort of the supreme judge in the Roman, as a Roman leader in this province. There's many provinces in Roman Empire. And so he is a soldier and he is a governor, procurator. He was a magistrate. He could, rule cases. As a matter of fact, he's the only one that was allowed to execute somebody, have someone in court go to death. It used to be different there, but at this point when Jesus was alive, and that's why the Sanhedrin couldn't really kill him or crucify. They couldn't crucify him for sure, and they brought him to Pilate. So here's what it says: early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people, that's the Sanhedrin, came to the decision to put Jesus to death. So early in the morning. Now, it already started late at night, if you remember. This is why I think, and I'm not positive for sure, that this is the third case right here, the third court case. We have Annas and Caiaphas and others, a Sanhedrin, and then this is the third time that he sort of went to a trial, and this is when they made their decision and they plotted. And then the next one, the next set of trials is when they brought Jesus to Pontius Pilate, or Pontius Pilatus. Okay, so it says, early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people came to the decision to put Jesus to death. Why is it mentioned early in the morning? I've said it before, but I kind of want to remind you that I think it was all done quickly and fast. Try to get this done before Jerusalem arose out of their beds and said, what is going on? All right, so they bound him and led him away. They bound him up, and maybe at this point they had let him go with soldiers around him. I don't know, kind of take his bounds away. But anyway, they bound him up, maybe even more, so he couldn't try and run as he went out of the Caiaphas Caiaphas, or Caiaphas is another way of pronouncing it, house. So they bound him up more and led him away and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. Then it goes into other stories, which we're not going to get to right now. For right now, and some more, maybe 1 or 2 videos, we'll see how fast I can go. We're going to talk about Pilate because I think it's really interesting. It's very interesting to find out who is this guy, what is he like, what type of governor was he, and how did Jews feel about him. And all that history, that background, will make it very interesting for you. So let's see. Let's start with where the direction of where they were taking him. It's either one of two places, and most scholars now believe, really a learned one, a very educated person who's done a lot of study. Nowadays, they think that he went from Caiaphas' house right here, that square there, and that he went up north. Oops, let me get this real quick so I don't lose it. Okay, let's do it this way. So he was here, and then he went up to here, north. And this is kind of probably the Mount Zion right here. And it's about 200 feet higher than this area right here. So it's kind of up on a higher hill. And that's why they built these places right here, I believe. It's kind of the richer neighborhoods probably. There's probably a lot of poor people throughout. But right here they went into what's called Herod's Palace. And this could be where the Praetorium was. Surrounding the palace of Herod is where court cases were done and where soldiers guarded the palace of Herod so that Jews wouldn't revolt and have a riot and try and take over the place. And there were also 3 of Herod's towers right there. I think Herod the Great actually built this, and if I'm not mistaken in my reading. And actually those towers have probably had guards that would watch below and to see if there's anybody's crowds coming up to that place. That's my thinking. But anyway, this is where Jesus was led, up here, and early in the morning. Oh, the other place it could have been, in the history it used to be, and I've already talked about it, I believe, is Antonia Fortress. So, yeah, I don't think he was there, although there were soldiers there for sure. The Antonia Fortress was built right beside west corner above the temple, so that there's a garrison, a bunch of soldiers right there in case there were real problems in the temple that could have happened, riots and things like that. They would have been able to be right there, kind of a guard there. Okay, so let's talk about this Pilate guy. There's a lot. Well, actually, there's not that much information. Thank God for the New Testament. The Gospels gives us even more. He's not that popular in history, although there are some writings in history of Jewish writers like Pliny, or my goodness, who's that guy's name? Now I'll have probably in the next video, I'll tell you. Can't think of it exactly. Anyway, definitely Josephus wrote about him quite a bit. And then there was Tacitus, who wrote 200 years later some information that actually suggested, or no, Tertullian wrote about him, that he actually became a Christian later. That's just really hearsay. A rumor that he actually became a Christian. His wife, they suggest the tradition, and these could be made up stories, but there might be some validity. It could be true that Pontius Pilate may have actually become a Christian later because of the death of Jesus. I don't know. Probably not. There's other stories that he committed suicide, and maybe we'll get into that later. We'll see how much I can get into. But anyway, here's this guy right here, Marcus Pontius Pilatus. And basically, he was the governor, the procurator. They were like different ones. I think there were 2 others before him. And usually there were, and I've heard and read, maybe there was a total of 60, but I'm not sure if that's accurate, 60 different procurators of Judea. And so we'll get into that as we study more. But anyway, there were 2 before him. And the one before him was actually 11 years. Gratus is his last name. But he took it, and he had 10 years. He came in 26 AD. On a timeline, it would be like 26 AD here, when Tiberius became the emperor, the chief guy, the king, if you will, of all the Roman Empire. So he came in at No, he didn't come in at the time of Tiberius. Tiberius came in, I think, of 14 AD, and then 11 years later or so, Pontius Pilate, we'll call him that as well, came in at 26 AD, and then he was deposed, kicked out at 36. So he had 10 years of ruling, which is unusual. Usually the governors of that area, it was pretty hotbed. It was a lot of problems. It was a real struggle. It wasn't a desired place to be assigned, appointed. And so during that time, he did a long time. A lot of them were like 2-3 years or something, like procurator every 3 years. But Gratus and Pilate did it for a pretty long time. And it seemed like he did a pretty good job overall of keeping peace, of allowing the high priests to do stuff. And it seems like over time, he wasn't happy with the Jewish people, and the Jewish people weren't happy with him. And I'll give you 3 major incidents. There's 4 or 5, but 3 major ones or so that kind of really irked those people, and it could have been an insurrection, like a big riot, and ooh, they were mad at him. And he was mad at them. He didn't like them. He didn't like their religious stuff, the religious rules and laws, and but well, let me get into it. But let's talk about real quick about what it was like to be a procurator. Pontius Pilate being that basically almost had absolute power. I mean, he could really rule, and he ruled strong, it seemed. But it seems like he had some definite weakness, which we're talking about. So it's kind of a mixed character of strong and also weak. Okay, we'll get into that later. But there were complaints. Complaints, by the way, could be made to the Senate at Rome or the emperor. Complaints could go there, and that was his check and balance to try and hold these procurators from doing too much. They could have done anything and all that, but then they would complain to Tiberius, that emperor at that time, and Augustus was the first one before him, and they could go up to Augustus or the senators. They would travel up there and have all these complaints, and then the senators would then like okay, governor. Usually they would follow some of those complaints and tell the governor to get in line, because they don't want a hot insurrection, big things. They'll start losing their money from them, the taxes that they were getting from them, and it was just not peace, and they wanted Pax Romana, which is a peace of Rome. But anyway, they tried to keep the peace all over the world. All right, he also made deals with local authorities. He did make deals, and procurators and governors tried to make deals with the leaders in the Jewish nation there. He had police powers, even though his procurator or prefect is a military term, like for armies. He had armies at his disposal to a point, but they kind of became more like policemen, not soldiers and military soldiers. There were some there, I'm sure. But it says police powers were his, especially troops from the non-Roman citizens. So there were non-Roman citizens. He collected them from outside of Rome, and he had those as some of his policemen, his soldiers. He judged law cases, like I mentioned before, and he had the power to do what's called executions, which means he could put people to death. He could assign them to die, which is exactly what happened with Jesus. And from my understanding, he only had 3 crucifixions total, and that was the day Jesus died. There were 2 people on either side of him that he died. By the way, the guy who was before him, he actually had, I think, about at least 200 crucifixions that he did. So that's pretty intense, 200, and Pilate didn't have that many. So he was calmer, it looks like, about that. His main job was to collect taxes and send. He used to collect them for himself, but he was very wealthy, I'm sure. But he also sent a lot of money to Rome, which is the whole point of him being there and controlling. All that money made Rome rich, all the emperor and all the senators and all that. He also watched over construction projects, building things and all. And we'll get into it. Something that he tried to build, an aqueduct, water aqueduct. And he also especially had law and order. He had to do, he was there to keep law and order, to keep it peaceful and calm. For the most part, he did a pretty good job, I think. His character it seemed like he had anger, he was brutal, he was reckless, he was tough. And a guy named, was it Pliny? He was the other, I can't think of the name, starts with the P. Anyway, he was a guy who seriously wrote a letter to the emperor, and he named all these things. He was horrible. He did this. He was stubborn, and just a whole list of things, one after the other. Of course, this is a Jewish writer, and they didn't like Rome being over them. But anyway, it could be accurate, but we're not sure. He was the fifth. One writer said sixth, but I think most of them have said he was the fifth Roman governor, the fifth one, the number. Oh, I said three. Actually, my bad. He was a fifth. I named two. That was there, but there was others for sure. And then he was, like I said, from 26 to 36 or 37. It's a discrepancy. It's not a definite date of 37 AD. All right, he ruled the provinces of Judea, Samaria, and Idumea, and I'll show that in a little bit in a map. And his empire, the empire, by the way, ruled over 1,000 cities indirectly through these procurators and these leaders and legates. As long as the taxes were collected and allegiance, they expected all those people to be allegiant, like show their allegiance, my pledge allegiance to Rome, and as long as they got their taxes and they said, yes, we are under your rule, they admitted that, they submitted to the rule of Rome, then it was pretty, they were happy, and they didn't send a bunch of souls or destroy them or wipe them out or anything. So the problem is Pontius Pilatus made some major mistakes through his reign. The very first thing that happened, oh my goodness, I'll get that later. The very first thing that happened in 26 AD is he had soldiers enter at nighttime. He had them enter Jerusalem with images on banners or flags. It's called standards. And they would take them in there. And the Jewish people said, we don't want those images in here. They were hot mad. It was rude to them, and they counted it as idolatry. You're not supposed to have any images of people and all. They were really strong against that. By the way, other procurators didn't do that. They kept it out of Jerusalem because they knew they considered that city their holy city, and they don't want to have conflict with them. Well, either Pilate didn't really study them very well or didn't know the ways and their culture and all that, or he just was stubborn like that writer said, this guy is stubborn. He's just going against us. And so they made him mad. They made them mad. Now, he was up, actually, when he did this, when he came in, he was up at Caesarea, and he literally had armies go from here. That's where their base was, right there in Caesarea. Herod the Great built that right there in the harbor, which is an amazing feat for what he did there. But anyway, really great builder. He built a theater there. And by the way, I just want to mention something. Right at that theater, in one of the slabs, a stone was literally found in 1961 where his name was on there. And it mentioned him as a prefect. So outside of the Bible and other writings, that's a literal archaeological find that an Italian guy, archaeologist, found that. And I've seen pictures of it. It's very cool. It's an old artifact that actually proves that the Bible's true. It's many, many proofs that the Bible's true and that they're not making up stories and these aren't myths. There was a Pontius Pilate right there. And there it was, right there written out. Like, it was pretty cool that they found that. But it was found in Caesarea right here. And now, this is where the armies in the Roman capital of this, there's major cities all over the world and major cities in the empire. And Caesarea was what they chose. And you can hear the name Caesar in honor of Caesar. Augustus, I believe, is what they honored him with. Well, this is where Pontius Pilate headquarters were. And what he decided to do is take the armies here and put some of them down here in Jerusalem and mount in that fortress of Antonia right by the temple. And when they were coming in, they had at night, the next morning, they woke up and they saw they either saw the images of an eagle, which is not good. That was the sign of Rome. And also smaller images of the picture of Caesar Tiberius, leader, the king, the emperor. Now, I've also read that he covered them over, so they wouldn't see him, and then but they found out that they were there anyway on those flags and banners as they walked in. And they were hot. And as a matter of fact, it's written in different, and I've read and heard it all, that there were 7,000 or more, at least 7,000 men, Jewish people, marched, 60 miles, 65 miles from Jerusalem, all the way up to here, and they surrounded the palace of Pontius Pilate. And they said, we want you to take those banners out, get them out of Jerusalem. And around the temple, they actually brought it into Antonia Fortress, so it was right by the temple. Get him out of there. And and he refused. He was pretty stubborn, I guess. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. But they stayed there and they stopped eating. They fasted. And it was day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. On day 6, he was like, oh my goodness. Now think about this. People were coming in at it, trying to get in. 7,000 people were surrounding on the lawn, back door, front, well, not, there's a side door, which is right by the Mediterranean Sea. They didn't go into the water, but on the 3 sides of that palace, they literally surrounded it. Think about 7,000 people in your backyard or your side yards. And so anybody coming from Rome to visit him, or people in and out and all, officials and soldiers, they had to go through all those crowds. So he was getting mad. So finally on the 6th day, he went out, or first he actually, is this the time? No, this isn't the time, but he actually had soldiers collect him up and bring him to a marketplace so that he could speak to him. So they did that. They all brought him around, and I don't know where that marketplace was. So he went and he addressed them. He spoke to them. And he told them, if you don't quit harassing me, if you don't quit this and go home, I'm going to have you all killed. That's what he said to him. You know what they did? Every one of them laid down and they said, go ahead and do it. They literally, what one source that I read or heard about was that they literally stuck their necks out like this and said, go ahead and kill us. Go ahead and take our heads off, because they had such a zeal, such a hatred of those signs being like as symbols or idolatry, idol worship. By the way, at that time, they were worshiping emperors. And of course, I'm against that. Jewish people are against that. Only one God, and he is the emperor of emperors, king of kings, lord of lords. He's the only sovereign. He's the only one who deserves to rule and reign. He's the only one God. But they were worshiping these emperors, past emperors, especially Augustus and Tiberius, especially Tiberius, and it went on, it got worse. But there was worship of emperor worship at that time. And so they went ahead and laid down, 7,000 of them, and they said, go and kill us. Now, he said, at that point, he said, all right, take those banners out of there, bring them back up here to Caesarea. They convinced him to change his mind. I mean, think about it. If he would have had them killed and word got back to the emperor that 7,000 people were killed because of flags, he said, I'm out of here. They put pressure on him. And there was a time to protest, and they were protesting right there. And so they, he changed. He changed his mind on that. Now, I don't know how long after. It could have been short, could have been right after that. A second offense, a second thing that got them really aggravated at him, and they didn't like his ruling here, was he had some sort of tablets. I don't think these are the shields. This could have been the shields or something that were golden shields. I think this is the incident where the golden shields were dedicated to the emperor, and they brought him to Herod's palace. Remember, Herod's palace is on that west coast of Jerusalem, the border. Probably right there. Could have been a little bit over, but it was on the upper city right here. And he had shields, golden shields. I think this is tablets meaning golden shields here. I know the golden shields were used. I think that was the time that he had them. And maybe this is the time, by the way, that he actually covered them over. Maybe not the first time as I think about it, but it's a little confusing for me. But maybe he put blankets over them, and then once he got to Herod's palace, in honor of Tiberius, all these golden shields, beautiful gilded and golden shields that literally was put at the palace. Well, for whatever reason, they didn't like it. I'm not even sure if there were images on that. There could have been, but they didn't like it again, and so they had leaders write letters. Some of the leaders of Judea write letters to Tiberius personally, got it up to him, and he ordered them to take it down and bring it to Caesarea again. And so he's rolling his eyes. Okay, I'll do it again. But he had to obey Tiberius, so it wasn't obeying Jews at this time, Jewish people. The third thing that aggravated the Jewish people, this became a really serious thing, was a new water aqueduct, like I mentioned earlier, about 25 miles south out of Jerusalem, down here. Then to Jerusalem, he started building an aqueduct, like a pipe system to bring water up there. I guess there was a lack of water at times. There was only the pool of Siloam there, and so I think he was trying to help them maybe. But there's two problems with it. Number one, he actually took money, korban money, that means gifted money, gifts from the people of Israel, from the Jewish people, out of the temple. He took their money, and gave the money to the construction and the work of the aqueduct, paid people and all that to build that pipeline. Well, it's possible that really didn't irk them as much as the other idea was that it seems like Josephus, and if you read his writings carefully, that they didn't like the water coming from there, the unholy water, like from somewhere else, and coming into the holy place, coming into the temple area, coming into Jerusalem, the holy city. And it wasn't pure water in their minds or something. That could have been it, or it was just the idea of the money that was taken out of the sacred money that was donated for the temple, where he's using their money instead of taxes outside of that. He used the money from the temple. Now, at that point, they gathered around him, and when he came down, and by the way, he hardly ever visited Jerusalem. He was there at least once a year at Passover time. That's when he came into the Antonia fortress, and he also stayed a lot at Herod's palace. I'm not going to show you that map again, but he was over there a lot. That's where his headquarters were, not headquarters, but he resided. He visited and stayed there while the week of Passover was going on, in case he needed to, order more soldiers out, and he had soldiers around him all the time, and more out of Herod's temple to go down there, or Herod's palace. So anyway, so he came, I think, literally at that point to the Antonia palace, or fortress, sorry. I keep messing up with words all the time, but he came to the Antonia fortress, sorry. And a lot of soldiers are there, but he anticipated, he thought they're going to be mad at this aqueduct. He heard rumor about it. And so what he decided to do is he literally had soldiers disguised as Jewish people, and all the crowds, they started coming around that in the temple around Antonia fortress. And he's had a lot of soldiers disguised that mingled in those crowds. And finally, he gave a signal, some sort of signal from the fortress up there. It was high. And soldiers with sticks, like really sticks, started beating, like all of a sudden beating the crowds. And some of them, it seems to may have had daggers, like knives. And started actually killing them, some of them. Innocent, or protesters were starting to get killed. And they started running out in panic. And some of them got killed, I think, as they were running, trampling over the others. It's kind of sad there. Well, the whole thing is sad. And that was another problem. So this time there was blood shedding. And by the way, there is a passage that we'll get to in Luke. We'll talk at length more there. In Luke 13, verse 1, it talks about Pilate mingling the blood of Galilean Jews, with the blood of their sacrifice, as a way of saying it, where maybe that was the incident, or maybe it was a different incident, where Pilate had Galileans from Galilee. And remember, Galilee is up here where Jesus was teaching, and he hung out mainly, and that's where he grew up at, in the northern part of Israel. And then also there's Samaria and Judea. And by the way, he had his power, his ruling, Pilate's rule was over, not over Galilee, that was Herod Antipas. He was over Samaria, he was over Judea, and he was also over this land right down here, south of Jerusalem, and it's called Idumea. he had 3 areas for his province. He was over that area, and that's where Jerusalem was in there. And so he killed some Galileans. I don't know how many, could have been a number of them. But by the way, Herod Antipas was not a friend. He was not a friend of Pontius Pilate. They weren't friends. It could have been after he killed some of his citizens, Galilean Jews, and he didn't go up and do it there, I don't believe. I think he did it at Jerusalem, and because about the mingling of the sacrifices, it was in temple area that he killed some of those Jews. He had some of his soldiers kill them, Galilean Jews. Then coming up here in one of the trials, there's something that happened, which we'll get to later, about that. But anyway, let me finish up here. I am talking a lot, aren't I? But it's all it's history. It's interesting. Okay, so that's when he shed some blood there. And also, well, those are the 3 things mainly, and the Galilean bloodshed, which is maybe a 4th thing. Of course, there's another thing that he blew right here big time, and that is the execution of Jesus, the trial of Jesus, which we're going to get into probably the next video. We're going to start that trial. Wow, was that really deep and interesting and sad, of course, but also glorious because Jesus went to the trials for us. But these are the 3 things, and then Jesus, that's a 4th, and then the 5th could have been another incident with Galileans. And then after Jesus died, and this is in 36 AD, this is when he got kicked out of the rulership of the governor. He was kicked out as a governor. This is what happened. He caused deaths. He had his soldiers come to a mountain in Samaria called Mount Gerizim. And there's Ebal and Gerizim. And he went to that because there was an imposter, was a deluded guy who came in there, and he caused a lot of the Samaritans to get together and go to that. He said, I'm going to show you things that are buried on this mountain, that Mount Gerizim. And they came to the foot of the mountain, and he was going to show them what Moses had buried there. And they were all deluded, and they said, okay, Moses didn't even go to Gerizim. He didn't go to the promised land. So that was a mistake there, but I think they were armed. That's what one historian or one scholar has said. They were armed, and so he had some soldiers, his soldiers' armies, because he was over Samaria, go to them and to stop that rebellion. He thought there was a rebellion, as a crowd of people, some word got to him, and so he sent soldiers over there, and there was conflicts, and I don't know the details, of course, and people were killed. A lot of them, almost all of them. He killed the leaders, that guy who was trying to lead that. And some of the Samaritans went up, I should bring this back out, up to Syria to talk to Valerius. I can't think of his name now. Valerius, I believe it is. Went up there to Syria, he was the guy who was over, Pontius Pilate was over all this. So this is the top guy, and then the second guy. That's why he was called, the prefect instead of legate. Legate is a higher form of military service, higher rank. And so Valerius heard about that, and he was mad at that he took that approach. And so he sent Marcellus, or there's another writing of Marulus, but I've read 2 different names of that. They spelled it different ways, all these names. Marcellus down, and he became the procurator, and he kicked him out, and he sent him to answer for the charges, to go to Rome and have to justify himself. He had to go to Tiberius. But Tiberius was really on his verge of dying. And when he finally got there, which is about 36 or 37 AD, Anno Domini, that's when he realized Tiberius was dead, and Caius, or Caligula, oh, what an emperor he was. Ugh, man. Caligula was the guy, and so he had to go to court with him. And now, after that, it's not certain what happened to Pontius Pilate. There's rumors, there's stories. Some say that he just rebuked him and all, and then he just went out and he never got another place to rule. There's others that say he may have gotten another place to rule instead of Judea and Samaria and Idumea, or that he actually executed him. He said, you shouldn't have done that, and we're tired of you, and had him killed. The emperor could have the power to do that. Caligula was really rotten anyway. He was really awful, and his reign, most of these Roman rulers were horrible, these emperors. I think Augustus was better. Tiberius wasn't as bad. It went downhill. It went really bad. Some were worse than others. There were some better times. But anyway, or he was exiled to France or Italy. There's different rumors about that. And there's a tomb in one of the places with a 52-foot towers at his tomb. That's where he was buried. Others said that he converted as a Christian, and he may have testified on behalf of Jesus there. But well, there's no definite story. There is definite stories that he committed suicide. That's also that he was executed and his body was thrown into a river, and that's a bad burial place. Just throw him in there, or that he jumped into that river and committed suicide. Who knows? Really, it's kind of lost at this point in antiquity, in history. There might be some more digs that come up, which gives us more information. But this kind of gives you a background of Pontius Pilate. We're going to go even deeper into his character as we go, as we watch him and how he and Jesus interacts and how he and some of the Sanhedrin. In my opinion, Annas and Caiaphas might not have been there. Annas probably wasn't, but who knows? Caiaphas might have been, or he had his leaders and his main servants go and speak on his behalf. I'm not sure. He's not mentioned that he was there. I don't think. Anyway, so that verse again says, all that because of these verses right here, the first two verses. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people came to the decision to put Jesus to death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to, and now you know him more. I don't think I have anything to share, any other things to share here. They handed him over to Pilate, the governor. Thanks for listening. Thanks for taking this whole time to listen to this. Hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed sharing about it. It's pretty interesting. I love history. I hope you get a love for history. It's awesome. God bless you.